Hiyori moved through the dark hallway of the abandoned space station. Her footsteps made no sound. The only noise was the soft hiss of her breathing mask and the distant creak of metal as the old station turned slowly in space. She was hunting. Her target, a smuggler named Jisoo, was hiding somewhere in this wreck. The bounty on Jisoo's head would pay for repairs to Hiyori's ship and fuel for 3 months. Hiyori needed this catch. The red scales on her face caught the dim emergency lights. Hiyori was Caledonian, a reptilian species known for their hunting skills. Most beings in this part of space feared Caledonians. Hiyori used that fear to her advantage. She stopped at a junction and lifted her scanner. The device showed a heat signature 2 levels below. Hiyori smiled, showing sharp teeth. Jisoo thought she was clever, hiding in the station's old engine room where heat from the dying power core would mask her body temperature. But Hiyori's scanner was specially made to find people who didn't want to be found. "Run all you want," Hiyori whispered to herself. "It just makes the hunt more fun." She found a maintenance shaft and climbed down quickly. Her clawed hands gripped the metal ladder easily. The cybernetic implant in her left eye glowed faintly blue in the darkness, helping her see heat trails that normal eyes couldn't detect. The trails led her forward. The engine room doors were sealed, but that didn't stop Hiyori. She pulled a small device from her belt and placed it against the control panel. Within seconds, the ancient lock clicked open. Hiyori drew her stun weapon and slipped inside. The engine room was vast and filled with machinery. Most of it hadn't worked in years. Shadows filled the corners. Perfect hiding spots. Perfect hunting grounds. "I know you're here, Jisoo," Hiyori called out. Her voice echoed between the silent machines. "Your ship is docked on level 4. I've already locked it down. There's nowhere to go." Something moved behind a large tank. Hiyori turned quickly, her weapon ready. "The guild is paying good money for you," she continued. "They don't care if I bring you in awake or sleeping. Your choice." A figure darted between 2 machine banks. Hiyori tracked the movement easily. Humans might have better endurance, Vorkans might have better strength, but nothing in the galaxy beat a Caledonian's reaction time. Hiyori fired. The stun blast hit Jisoo square in the back. The smuggler fell hard on the metal floor. "Always choose the easy way," Hiyori said as she approached the unconscious figure. She turned Jisoo over and checked her pulse. Still strong. Good. Dead bounties paid less. As Hiyori bound Jisoo's hands, her scanner beeped. She froze. The device showed another life sign nearby. Very faint. Very small. It couldn't be another person. Hiyori had studied this station's layout carefully before arriving. No one else was supposed to be here. The station had been abandoned for years after a reactor problem made it unsafe. Curious now, Hiyori secured her prisoner to a pipe and followed the new signal. It led her to a sealed door at the back of the engine room. The door was different from the others. Newer, stronger, with its own power supply. Someone had installed it recently. Someone had wanted to keep something safe, or keep something inside. Hiyori hesitated. Extra complications meant extra risk. The smart move was to take Jisoo and leave. Collect the bounty. Move on to the next job. But the hunter in her couldn't ignore a mystery. Her clawed finger hovered over the door's control panel. The scanner beeped again. The life sign was getting weaker. Hiyori pressed the button. The door slid open. Inside was a single stasis pod, its blue light flickering as power failed. Through the frosted glass, Hiyori could just make out a small figure. A child. A human child. Hiyori stared at the stasis pod. The blue light inside flickered weakly. The pod was running out of power. She stepped closer, her clawed hand touching the cold surface of the glass. Inside lay a small human child. Humans were rare in this part of space. Most stayed in their home systems, far from the outer rim where Hiyori worked. "What are you doing out here, little one?" she whispered. Hiyori checked the pod's control panel. It was marked with strange symbols she didn't recognize right away. Then she noticed a small screen on the side. It showed writing in Standard Galactic. Emergency protocol activated. Hiyori read aloud. Research vessel Starlight Dawn. Passenger, Do-Yun Kim. Age, 6 standard years. The screen flashed, and more words appeared. Warning, power at 3%. Stasis failure imminent. Hiyori hissed softly. If the pod lost power, the child would die. Human children were delicate. They needed special care. She looked back at Jisoo, still unconscious, and tied to the pipe. The bounty hunter had a job to finish. Taking care of a human child was not part of that job. But something made her hesitate. She touched the screen again, and more information appeared. Pod ejected 3 cycles ago following ship destruction. All other crew lost. Automatic distress beacon activated. 3 cycles. This child had been floating in space for 3 years, waiting for someone to find this pod. 3 years alone. Hiyori knew what it was like to be alone. She had been alone most of her life. She made a decision. She pressed the emergency release button on the pod. There was a hiss of air as the seal broke. The glass cover slid open slowly. Inside, the child was tiny, much smaller than Caledonian children of the same age. It had pale skin and dark hair. Its chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. It wore a simple white suit with a small patch that read, Starlight Dawn Junior Researcher. Carefully, Hiyori lifted the child. It weighed almost nothing in her strong arms. Its skin felt fragile, like it might tear if she wasn't careful with her claws. Do-Yun, she said, testing the name. You're a long way from home. The child didn't stir. Stasis sleep was deep. It would take time for the child to wake up. Hiyori carried Do-Yun back to where Jisoo was tied up. The smuggler was beginning to wake up, groaning softly. Looks like I have 2 passengers now, Hiyori said. She adjusted her hold on the child and tapped the communication device on her wrist. Ship, prepare for return. 3 to transport. 3? Jisoo had opened her eyes. She looked confused. What is that thing? Not a thing, Hiyori said. A human child. A human. Out here. Jisoo tried to sit up straighter. That's rare. Probably worth a lot to the right buyer. Hiyori's eyes narrowed. The child is not for sale. Come on, Hiyori. You're a bounty hunter. Everything has a price. Not everything, Hiyori said firmly. Some things are beyond price. She didn't know why she felt so protective of this strange child. Perhaps it was because she had found it. In Caledonian culture, finding something meant you were responsible for it. Or perhaps it was because the child had survived when it should have died. Hiyori respected survival. She carried Do-Yun through the dark hallways of the station, dragging Jisoo behind her. When they reached her ship, the Venomtooth, she placed the child carefully in the medbay. The ship's computer scanned Do-Yun. Human child. Malnourished but stable. Stasis effects will wear off in approximately 6 hours. Hiyori nodded. 6 hours to decide what to do next. She should take the child to the nearest Galactic Administration outpost. They would know what to do with a lost human. But something told her that wouldn't be the end of this story. She looked at the sleeping child. What secrets do you hold, little Do-Yun? And why were you the only survivor? Hiyori sat in the pilot's seat of the Venomtooth. Her clawed fingers moved quickly over the controls. The ship hummed to life and pulled away from the abandoned station. Jisoo was locked in the holding cell. The human child, Do-Yun, still slept in the medbay. Hiyori had set course for Krell Station, where she could collect her bounty for capturing Jisoo. But now she faced a problem. What to do with the child? The ship's computer beeped. Incoming message from Guild Master Nabi, it announced. Hiyori sighed. She pressed a button. A hologram appeared on the dashboard. It showed an older Caledonian female with gray scales and sharp eyes. Hiyori, Nabi said. Do you have the smuggler? Yes, Guildmaster. Jisoo is secure in my holding cell. Good. Bring her to Krell Station immediately. The client is getting impatient. Hiyori hesitated. There's a complication. Nabi's eyes narrowed. What kind of complication? I found something else on the station. A human child in a stasis pod. Nabi was silent for a moment. Then she hissed softly. A human. That far out in space. Strange. The pod records say the child survived a ship destruction 3 cycles ago. And the child is alive. Yes, still in stasis sleep, but alive. Nabi tapped her claws against something off-screen. This complicates things. The bounty on Jisoo includes a time bonus. If you don't deliver her within the next rotation, the payment drops by 30%. Hiyori frowned. She needed that money. The Venom tooth needed repairs. But she couldn't just dump the child anywhere. What should I do with the human? She asked. Take it to the Galactic Administration outpost on Traxxas. They handle orphaned aliens. Hiyori knew Traxxas was in the opposite direction from Krell Station. Going there would mean losing the time bonus. That's 2 days off my route, she said. Then drop the child at the next habitable planet. Someone will take it in. Nabi didn't sound concerned. Remember, Hiyori, bounty hunters can't afford to be soft. We do the job. We get paid. That's all. The hologram disappeared. Hiyori stared at the empty space where it had been. She knew Nabi was right. Bounty hunters couldn't be soft. Hiyori had built her reputation on being tough and reliable. She always delivered her targets on time. But leaving a helpless child on some random planet felt wrong. Hiyori checked the ship's star chart. There was a small trading post half a day from their current position. She could drop Doyun there. Someone might help the child. Or someone might sell Doyun to the highest bidder. Humans were rare. Some collectors paid well for rare things. Hiyori growled in frustration. Why did she even care? The child was nothing to her, just something she found. Like finding a shiny rock. You look at it for a moment, maybe pick it up, but eventually you put it down and move on. She set the autopilot and went to check on Doyun. The med bay was quiet except for the soft beep of monitors. The child lay still, small chest rising and falling gently. The stasis effects hadn't worn off yet. Hiyori looked at the medical readout. It showed the child was underweight but otherwise healthy. Ship, how long until Doyun wakes up? She asked. Approximately 4 hours, the computer replied. 4 hours to decide what to do. Hiyori touched one clawed finger to the child's hand. The skin was soft and warm now, no longer cold from stasis. Doyun's fingers were tiny compared to her own. Something stirred in Hiyori's chest, a feeling she didn't recognize right away. It was protectiveness, the same feeling she had when defending her territory or her ship. Somehow, in the short time since finding the pod, this human child had become part of what Hiyori considered hers to protect. She made her decision. Shipped, change course, she said. We're going to Krell Station first. Maximum speed. She would deliver Jisoo, collect her full bounty. And then she would figure out what to do with Doyun. The child would stay with her for now. A soft alarm woke Hiyori. She had fallen asleep in the chair beside the medbay bed. The ship's computer spoke quietly. The human child is waking up. Hiyori sat up straight and watched as Doyun's eyes fluttered. The child's fingers twitched. Then suddenly, the brown eyes opened wide. Doyun stared at Hiyori. There was fear in those eyes, but also something else. Curiosity. Most beings would scream at the sight of a Caledonian. With their red scales, sharp teeth, and clawed hands, Caledonians looked fierce to many species. But Doyun just stared. Hello, Hiyori said in standard galactic. You're safe. The child blinked a few times, then tried to sit up. Hiyori helped, placing a pillow behind Doyun's back. Water. Hiyori offered a small cup. Doyun took it with shaking hands and drank slowly. Then the child spoke. The words were in a language Hiyori didn't know. Probably human language. I come understand, Hiyori said. She tapped the translator on her wrist, but it didn't help. The device wasn't programmed for human languages. Very few were, since humans rarely traveled this far from their systems. Do-hyun tried again, pointing to the self and saying a word that sounded like Do-hyun. Yes, Hiyori nodded. You are Do-hyun. She pointed to herself. I am Hiyori. The child repeated her name, Hiyori, struggling with the rolling R sound that humans found difficult. Close enough, Hiyori said with a small smile. She watched as Do-hyun looked around the medbay. The child's eyes moved from object to object, taking everything in. Then Do-hyun pointed to the door. You want to see the ship? Hiyori asked. Do-hyun just looked at her, not understanding the words but clearly waiting for something. All right, Hiyori said. Let's show you around. But first, let's find you some food. She helped Do-hyun off the bed. The child stood shakily at first, then more firmly. Hiyori led the way to the galley. The human was small, barely reaching Hiyori's waist, and had to take 2 steps for each of Hiyori's. In the galley, Hiyori faced a new problem. What did humans eat? She searched the ship's database. Humans are omnivores, the computer told her. They can eat plant and animal matter. They need water regularly. That didn't narrow it down much. Hiyori chose a simple protein bar and some fruit juice. She offered them to Do-hyun. The child sniffed the bar, then took a small bite. After a moment, Do-hyun nodded and took another bite, bigger this time. The juice disappeared quickly. More? Hiyori asked, making a drinking motion. Do-hyun nodded eagerly. While the child ate a second protein bar, Hiyori noticed something strange. Do-hyun was watching her every move, not just with curiosity but with focus. When Hiyori pressed buttons on the food dispenser, Do-hyun's eyes tracked her fingers. When she adjusted the temperature controls, the child paid close attention. After eating, Do-hyun pointed to the food dispenser, then made the same motion Hiyori had made when pressing the buttons. You want to try? Hiyori asked, surprised. She lifted the child up so Do-hyun could reach. Without hesitation, Do-hyun pressed the exact sequence of buttons Hiyori had used earlier. The machine hummed and produced another protein bar. Hiyori stared in amazement. The child had memorized the sequence after seeing it just once. Smart little thing, aren't you? She said. Do-hyun smiled for the first time since waking up. Later, in the cockpit, Hiyori sat in the pilot's chair with Do-hyun on her lap. She showed the child the basic controls, not the important ones that could damage the ship, just simple things like the lights and the communication system. To her surprise, Do-hyun began repeating words she said. Ship, the child said. Stars. Button. By the end of the day, Do-hyun knew 20 words in Standard Galactic. As Hiyori tucked the child into bed that night, she realized something. Humans might look weak, but their minds were strong. This child had lost everything, woken up in a strange place with a scary-looking alien, and yet was already learning and adapting. You're going to be all right, little one, Hiyori said softly. You're a survivor, just like me. 2 days had passed since Do-hyun woke up. The Venomtooth was almost at Krell Station. Hiyori sat in the pilot's seat checking their course. Do-hyun sat on the floor nearby, playing with some small metal parts Hiyori had given the child. We will arrive in 3 hours, Hiyori said. She had started speaking to Do-hyun often, even though the child didn't understand most words yet. It seemed to help. Do-hyun was learning quickly. 3, Do-hyun repeated, holding up 3 fingers. Hours. The child's voice was soft but clear. The ship's alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed across the control panel. Warning, the computer said. Ships approaching at attack speed. Hiyori moved fast. She pulled up the scanner. 3 small ships were closing in on them. Who are they? She growled. The computer identified them. Krev Collective vessels. Hiyori hissed in anger. The Krev Collective was a criminal group. Jisoo must be one of their members. They had come to take her back. Do-hyun, come here, Hiyori said, reaching for the child. She placed Do-hyun in the co-pilot's seat and fastened the safety straps. "Stay here. Understand? Stay." Do-hyun nodded, eyes wide. Hiyori activated the ship's shields and weapons. She was a good pilot, but 3 against 1 were bad odds. She opened a channel to the approaching ships. "This is the bounty hunter, Hiyori. The smuggler Jisoo is my legal catch. Turn back now." A rough voice answered her. "Give us Jisoo, or we blast your ship into space dust." Hiyori didn't bother replying. She cut the connection and pushed the engines to full power. The Venomtooth shot forward, but the Krev ships followed close behind. The first blast hit their rear shields. The ship shook hard. Do-hyun gripped the seat but didn't cry out. Hiyori turned the ship sharply, firing back at the closest enemy. Her shot hit its wing, sending it spinning away. But the other 2 kept coming. Another hit rocked the ship. The lights flickered. "Shields at 60%. The computer reported. Weapons system damage." This was bad. Without weapons, Hiyori couldn't fight back. She needed to reach Krell Station, where guild ships could help her. But the Krev ships were blocking her path. Suddenly, all the ship's systems went dark. The emergency lights came on, casting everything in a red glow. "Systems failure," the computer's voice said weakly. "Backup power only." Hiyori tried the controls. Nothing worked. They were sitting targets now. Do-hyun unbuckled the safety straps and stood up. "No," Hiyori said. "Stay in your seat." But Do-hyun pointed to a small hatch in the wall and made crawling motions with tiny hands. Hiyori understood. The maintenance ducts. They ran through the entire ship. They were too small for Hiyori to fit through, but perfect for a small human child. "You want to help?" Hiyori asked. "It's dangerous." Do-hyun nodded firmly. The child pointed to the control panel, then to the hatch again. Hiyori thought quickly. The main power relay was in the engine room. If someone could reset it, they might get systems back online. But the only way there now was through the maintenance ducts. "All right," she said. She lifted Do-hyun up to the hatch and opened it. "Go to the engine room. The big room with the glowing blue light. Find the big red button by the main power unit. Press it." She didn't know if Do-hyun understood, but there was no time to explain better. The Krev ships would board them any minute. Do-hyun crawled into the small tunnel and disappeared. Hiyori went to the weapons locker and grabbed her stun rifle. She could at least defend the ship when the Krev boarded. Minutes passed. The ship drifted helplessly in space. The enemy ships circled like hungry predators. Then, just as Hiyori heard banging on the outer airlock door, the lights came back on. The control panel lit up. The engines hummed to life. "Systems restarting," the computer announced. "Power restored." Hiyori jumped into the pilot's seat. She didn't wait for all systems to come back online. She pushed the engines to maximum, and the Venomtooth shot forward, leaving the surprised Krev ships behind. When they were safely away, Hiyori called out, "Do-hyun, where are you?" The maintenance hatch opened, and a small, dusty face appeared. Do-hyun was smiling proudly. "You did it," Hiyori said, relief flooding through her. "You saved us." They reached Krell Station without further trouble. Hiyori docked the Venomtooth and secured Jisoo for transfer to the guild's holding cells. "Stay on the ship," she told Do-hyun. "I won't be long." Do-hyun nodded. The child now understood many simple commands. In just 2 days, Do-hyun had learned over 50 words in Standard Galactic. Hiyori was amazed by the speed of learning. At the guild office, Hiyori collected her payment for bringing in Jisoo. Guild Master Nabi was waiting for her. "You made it on time," Nabi said, "despite your complication." "The human child," Hiyori said. "Yes. Have you decided what to do with it?" Nabi asked. "Not yet. I thought perhaps the Galactic Administration might help." Nabi made a sound like a laugh. "Let me show you something." She led Hiyori to a computer terminal and pulled up a file. It showed information about humans, Most of it Hiyori already knew, that they came from a planet called Earth, that they were still new to space travel, that they were physically weaker than many species. Then Nabi showed her something new, the official Galactic Administration classification for humans. Developmentally primitive species, Hiyori read aloud. What does that mean? It means that if you hand over your little human to the administration, they won't treat it like a lost child. They'll treat it like a research subject. Hiyori felt cold anger rising inside her. Research subject. But Do-yeon is a child, not a lab animal. To many in the administration, primitive species are all the same. Objects to study. Nabi said, I thought you should know before you make your decision. On her way back to the ship, Hiyori stopped at the station's information center. She needed to learn more about humans. The more she learned, the more confused she became. Humans were physically weak compared to many species. Their skin tore easily. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They couldn't breathe many common gases. They needed specific temperatures to survive. But their minds were different. Humans learned faster than almost any other known species. They could see patterns where others saw only chaos. They adapted to new situations with amazing speed. And they formed strong bonds quickly, not just with their own kind, but with any species they met. Most interesting to Hiyori was a note about human children. Exceptional neural plasticity allows for rapid acquisition of languages and skills. Caution advised when exposing human young to advanced technologies, as comprehension often exceeds expectations. This explained why Do-yeon had learned so many words so quickly, and how the child had figured out the ship's systems well enough to restore power during the attack. When Hiyori returned to the ship, she found Do-yeon sitting in the cockpit, carefully studying the flight controls. The child looked up and smiled when Hiyori entered. Hiyori back, Do-yeon said in standard galactic. Yes, I'm back, Hiyori replied. She sat down in the pilot's seat next to Do-yeon. We need to talk about what happens next. Do-yeon listened carefully as Hiyori explained, using simple words, that they needed to decide where the child would go. Hiyori wasn't sure how much Do-yeon understood, but she felt it was right to try. Do you want to find other humans? Hiyori asked. Do-yeon's face grew sad. The child pointed to a picture of the destroyed research vessel that Hiyori had pulled up on the screen earlier. Family. Gone. Do-yeon said softly. Those two words, spoken with such sadness, made Hiyori's decision for her. She knew what it was like to be alone. To have no family. She had survived, but it had been hard. She wouldn't send this child to be a research subject. She wouldn't dump Do-yeon at some outpost. You can stay with me, Hiyori said, if you want. Do-yeon's eyes widened. Then the child smiled and reached out a small hand to touch Hiyori's scaled arm. Stay with Hiyori, Do-yeon repeated. Yes. 2 months passed. Hiyori and Do-yeon settled into life together on the Venom Tooth. The small human was now speaking standard galactic quite well, though some sounds were still hard for Do-yeon to make. Hiyori had turned the storage room into a bedroom for Do-yeon. She found human-sized clothes at a trading post. She even found books that helped her understand what foods humans needed to stay healthy. Today, Hiyori had something new planned. She found Do-yeon in the engine room, watching the power core glow. Time for training, Hiyori said. Do-yeon jumped up, excited. What kind of training? Survival training. Every Caledonian teaches their young how to survive. You're not Caledonian, but you're in my care now. Hiyori led Do-yeon to the cargo bay. She had set up a small course with obstacles and targets. First, we learned to move quietly, Hiyori said. She demonstrated, walking across the metal floor without making a sound. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground. Do-yeon tried to copy her. The first attempts were noisy. Human feet were not made like Caledonian feet, but Do-yeon kept trying, again and again. By the end of the hour, the child was moving much more quietly. Good, Hiyori said. Now we learn to hide. This part was easier for Do-yeon. Being small had advantages. The child could fit into spaces Hiyori could not even see. Now we learn to watch, Hiyori continued. She set up a screen that showed a busy market scene. Tell me what you see. Do-Yun studied the screen carefully. 3 blue aliens by the fruit stand. One has a hidden weapon. The tall one with 4 arms is watching the jewelry shop. The small green one is stealing from the food cart when no one is looking. Hiyori was impressed. She had only noticed 2 of those things herself. How did you see all that? She asked. Do-Yun shrugged. I just look at everything. Over the next weeks, the training continued. Hiyori taught Do-Yun how to read star maps, how to identify dangerous species, how to find safe food and water on different planets. Do-Yun learned it all quickly. But more than that, the child often found new ways to solve problems that Hiyori had not thought of. One day, they were practicing with the ship's defense system. Hiyori had set up a simulation where enemy ships attacked them. What do we do if 3 ships attack from different directions? She asked. We shoot the closest one first, Do-Yun said. Yes, but what if they're all the same distance away? Do-Yun thought for a moment. We don't shoot. We send a false signal to make them think we're somewhere else. Hiyori stared at the child. This was not the answer she expected. Caledonians always fought when attacked. But Do-Yun's idea was clever. It would save time and energy. That's a good idea, Hiyori admitted. Do-Yun smiled proudly. Later that week, Hiyori took a new bounty job. A thief had stolen valuable gems from a mining colony. The thief was hiding on a jungle planet. Usually, Hiyori would have left Do-Yun on the ship, but this time, she decided to bring the child along. Stay close to me, she said as they landed on the planet. And remember your training. The jungle was hot and wet. Strange calls echoed through the trees. Hiyori tracked the thief to a hidden cave. But when they got there, they found the entrance was blocked by a security system. I can't get past this, Hiyori growled in frustration. The system needed a special code. Do-Yun looked at the lock carefully. Then the child picked up a stick and pressed it against certain spots on the lock, in a pattern. To Hiyori's surprise, the lock clicked open. How did you do that? She asked. I saw the worn spots on the buttons, Do-Yun explained. Those were the ones used most often. I tried different patterns until I found one that worked. Inside the cave, they found the thief sleeping. Hiyori caught him easily. As they flew back to collect the bounty, Hiyori looked at Do-Yun with new respect. The human child was small and physically weak, but that mind, that quick, clever mind, was a powerful weapon. You did well today, Hiyori said. You're becoming a good hunter. Do-Yun beamed with pride. We make a good team. Hiyori nodded. Yes, we do. 6 months had passed since Hiyori found Do-Yun. The human child was now a regular part of their bounty hunting operations. Word spread about the strange pair, a fierce Caledonian hunter and her small human helper who could solve puzzles no one else could. One day, Hiyori received a message that made her scales tingle with excitement. Look at this, Do-Yun, she said, showing the screen to the child. Tahoe, the biggest crime boss in the Krull sector, wants to hire us. Do-Yun read the message. He's offering 3 times your normal rate. Yes, he says he needs protection during a big meeting. This could be our biggest job yet. Do-Yun frowned slightly. Why would someone so powerful need us? Doesn't he have his own guards? He says he needs someone not connected to him. Someone no one would expect. Hiyori was already planning what they would do with all that money. Maybe a better ship or new equipment. It feels wrong, Do-Yun said quietly. Hiyori looked at the child. In the past months, she had learned to trust Do-Yun's feelings about things. Humans seemed to have a sense for danger that was different from Caledonians. We'll be careful, Hiyori promised, but we should at least meet with him. 2 days later, they docked at Tahoe's private space station. It was huge and luxurious, filled with expensive things from all over the galaxy. Tahoe himself was a large, purple-skinned alien with 4 arms and eyes that never seemed to blink. He welcomed them warmly. "The famous hunter and her human pet," he said. "I've heard so much about you both." "Not pet," Hiyori corrected him sharply. "Partner." Of course, Tahoe smiled, but his eyes were cold. "You must be tired from your journey. Let me show you to your rooms. We can discuss business after you rest." The rooms were the nicest Hiyori and Do-yeon had ever stayed in. Soft beds, real water showers, and fresh food instead of ship rations. "See, this isn't so bad," Hiyori said. But Do-yeon still looked worried. "His eyes followed me too much, and he kept asking questions about humans. Something isn't right." Later, they met Tahoe in his office. He explained the job. A rival gang was trying to kill him. He needed protection during an important meeting the next day. "Simple enough," Hiyori said. "We can handle that." "Excellent," Tahoe said. "Now, let's have dinner." I had my cook prepare special foods from many worlds, including Earth dishes for the little one. At dinner, Tahoe asked many questions about how Hiyori and Do-yeon worked together. He seemed especially interested in Do-yeon's abilities. "Is it true that human children learn faster than any other species?" he asked. "Some say that," Hiyori answered carefully. "And your little one there, can it really solve puzzles that stumped your best security experts?" "Do-yeon is smart," Hiyori said. She was beginning to feel uncomfortable with all these questions. After dinner, back in their rooms, Do-yeon whispered, "I don't want to sleep here. Let's go back to the ship." Before Hiyori could answer, gas began pouring from the vents in the ceiling. She tried to reach her mask, but her limbs felt heavy. The last thing she saw was Do-yeon collapsing to the floor. When Hiyori woke up, she was locked in a cell. Do-yeon was gone. A screen on the wall turned on. Tahoe's face appeared. "Good morning, Hunter," he said with a cold smile. "I hope you slept well." "Where is Do-yeon?" Hiyori growled, pulling at her chains. "Your human is safe, for now. You see, I never needed protection. What I need is a human child to study. They're so rare out here, and so valuable. The human brain is a fascinating thing. I plan to learn all its secrets. If you hurt Do-yeon, I will kill you," Hiyori promised. Tahoe laughed. "Big words from someone in chains. Don't worry. If the human survives my tests, I might even let you see it again. Eventually." The screen went dark. Hiyori roared in anger and pulled harder at her chains, but they were too strong. For the first time in years, she felt afraid. Not for herself, but for Do-yeon, the human child who had somehow become the most important thing in her life. Do-yeon sat in a white room. Men in lab coats moved around, setting up machines. Tahoe watched from behind a glass wall. "Now, little human," Tahoe said through a speaker, "let's see how smart you really are." They showed Do-yeon puzzles, hard ones, patterns that shifted and changed, locks with many parts, problems that most adults couldn't solve. Do-yeon solved them all. The scientists whispered to each other with excitement. Tahoe smiled. But Do-yeon was not just solving puzzles. The child was watching, learning, planning. Each time the scientists came close, Do-yeon studied their key cards, the way they walked, how they used the machines. When night came, they locked Do-yeon in a small room with a bed. They thought the child would sleep. They were wrong. As soon as the lights dimmed, Do-yeon pulled a thin metal rod from inside a shoe. During the tests, the child had taken it from one of the machines when no one was looking. Humans might be physically weak, but their fingers were nimble. Do-yeon worked on the door lock. It wasn't so different from the puzzles they had shown during the day. It took time, but finally, there was a soft click. The door opened. The hallway was empty. Do-yeon moved silently, just as Hiyori had taught. The child found a small vent in the wall and crawled inside. Humans were good at getting into small spaces. Meanwhile, Hiyori was still trying to break her chains. Her wrists were bleeding from pulling against the metal. She roared in frustration. Suddenly, she heard a soft noise from the ceiling. A vent cover moved, and then a small face appeared. "Do-yun," Hiyori whispered in shock. The child dropped down from the vent and ran to Hiyori. "I came to save you." "How did you escape?" Hiyori asked. "I watched them. Learned their patterns. Humans are good at seeing patterns." Do-yun pulled out a key card. "I took this from a scientist who fell asleep." The key card unlocked Hiyori's chains. She stood up, rubbing her sore wrists. "We need to get to the ship," she said. "I know where they put it," Do-yun replied. "I heard them talking." Level 3, Dock 7. They moved through the station carefully. Do-yun led the way, showing Hiyori which paths to take to avoid guards. When they needed to hide, Do-yun found perfect spots that Hiyori would never have noticed. They were almost at the dock when an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed. "They know we've escaped," Hiyori said. Guards appeared at the end of the hallway. Hiyori pushed Do-yun behind her and prepared to fight. But there were too many guards, all with weapons pointed at them. Taho stepped forward, clapping his hands slowly. "Impressive," he said. "The human is even more clever than I thought. And you, Hunter, are more loyal than I expected. But your little escape ends here." "Let us go," Hiyori growled, "or I will hunt you down one day and make you pay." Taho laughed. "Big threats from someone about to die. Kill them both. I can study the human's brain after death." The guards raised their weapons. Hiyori pushed Do-yun further behind her, shielding the child with her body. But Do-yun stepped out again, holding something in one small hand. "If you shoot," the child said clearly, "we all die." It was a small device with a blinking light. Hiyori recognized it immediately. The core destabilizer. If activated, it would cause the station's power core to explode. "Where did you get that?" Taho asked, his voice suddenly afraid. "I made it," Do-yun said, "from parts in your lab. Humans are good at making things from other things." Even Hiyori was surprised. She hadn't known Do-yun could build something so complex. "You're bluffing," Taho said, but he didn't sound sure. Do-yun's finger moved closer to the button. "Want to find out?" Taho raised his hands. "Wait, maybe we can make a deal." "The deal is this," Hiyori said. "We leave in our ship. You never come near us again." Or Do-yun presses that button. 10 minutes later, they were on the Venom Tooth, flying away from the station. "Did you really make a core destabilizer?" Hiyori asked. Do-yun grinned and opened the device. Inside was nothing but wires connected to a small light. "No, but it looked real enough." Hiyori laughed. Then she grew serious. "You saved my life today." "You saved mine first," Do-yun replied. "When you found my pod." Hiyori nodded. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old metal band with Caledonian symbols carved on it. "This is an alliance band," she explained. "In my culture, when two warriors save each other's lives, they can become formal allies, bound by honor to protect each other. Would you accept this alliance with me?" Do-yun's eyes widened. "Yes." As Hiyori placed the band on Do-yun's small wrist, she knew their story was just beginning. A Caledonian hunter and a human child, bound by honor and something more, something like family. Together, they would be unstoppable.